From the Southwest Growth Service is Katharine.
Thank you. You've got to kind of work out which way you're comfortable. On the right hand, so I'll try that. Right, well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Just for anyone who doesn't know me in the room, I'll give you a quick background, and then you won't worry that I'm going to spend a long time talking deeply about artificial intelligence, because it won't be a deep talk about the technical side of artificial intelligence. So this is me. I grew up on a Dartmoor farm. Once upon a time I was incredibly proud because I caught a fish. I don't think I've caught one that size since, but hey. Did 10 tours, so I was quite outdoorsy in my youth. I went off to London and worked in the city, where I met an Australian who I ended up married to, which took me to Cambodia. You can't juggle like that on the steps of Angkor Wat anymore because there's too many people. But luckily I was there before anybody was there as a tourist, so it was a joy. And then I came back to England, and we ended up back here in Plymouth running a computer shop. So my journey in computing kind of started in Phnom Penh, where I was thrilled to have a computer until I realised it didn't work. So they shipped up a motherboard from Canberra, and literally yours truly sat with a phone glued to her ear, fitting the motherboard and doing everything that the guy told me to. Left screw, remove, don't lose the screw. Built a computer. Suddenly this weird grey box, because I'm old enough to be of an age where they were weird grey boxes that kind of sat in a corner, was no longer quite so scary. Then we came back, as I say, to Devon, and I ended up running a computer shop here in the city of Plymouth. So my first real experience of computing, hardware, software, networking and support was at a time when they were all in different silos. So our shop, we sold actually 10 years ago this year. And since then I've been in consultancy. So the team on the bottom right are myself, Phil, Chris and Andrew, who run Southwest Growth Service. And our mission is to help businesses. So this talk is really a bit of a reflection on some of the stuff I love about tech, but a bit more about leadership and some of the other aspects that I think are important as we move into an increasingly data-centric world. So, artificial intelligence, just a quickie, because everyone sat down very quietly. What does it mean to you? Anyone want to? No? Does it not mean anything? Great.
Forecasting.
Sorry?
Forecasting.
Great. Anyone else?
Make an external decision based on data. Someone else has already made that decision about us.
Okay. Was there a hand at the back? Yeah.
Analytics and advertising.
Yeah. Right. Ben.
Terminator.
I was hoping someone was going to mention that. I'll come back to that.
Napoleon board games.
Sorry?
Like chess or go.
Yeah. Okay.
Learning and prediction.
Yeah.
Metrics.
Metrics. Okay. So lots of different thoughts when we think about artificial intelligence. So for the purpose of this, I thought I might just share what I like to describe it as. And for me, artificial intelligence is the capability of a machine to imitate intelligent human behaviour. You can put the intelligent in inverted commas sometimes, but that's what I mean by artificial intelligence. And I think we all know and we all use things. I think it was last time I was here, somebody called out OK Google, I won't try it, and somebody's device went off. But they're not very intelligent for me. Some of those things I find quite frustrating. Anyway, anybody know who this guy is? If you Google artificial intelligence, you'll find this guy. He's a fascinating man, Jürgen Schmidhuber, who works out in Lugano, which I always think is great because it sounds like it should be in some old 1970s film. I know it's a wonderful place in Switzerland. But he talks about a lot of things, and he's one of the guys at the forefront of artificial intelligence. And what I love is he talks about something that is called deep learning. But particularly, he talks about LSTM, which is long short-term memory. And when you investigate what that is, long short-term, or LSTM, basically is about an artificial neural network. So the way we work, our whole bodies, the fact that I can stand here and talk to you, is because my neural network is sending all the right connectors. The whole of my body is working collectively to make that happen. So for me, it's fascinating that when artificial intelligence began, it goes back a long, long way, back to the 50s. It's this development of these neural networks that really underpin that. And for me, some of the challenges around artificial intelligence are about how long it will be artificial. When a computer is made and is able to think, will it ever be able to think like we can? So for me, this is why I wanted to talk about artificial intelligence, because I think it's very exciting in some cases. I love the fact that I can get to my meetings on time, because a very intelligent device in my phone or in my car will help me avoid traffic jams and all that sort of thing. It's not very long ago I used to switch it on when I wanted to navigate somewhere and switch it off, because I didn't want Google knowing where I was all the time. But frankly, I take the view that actually it's quite helpful to let Google know where I am, because if everybody switches theirs off, then I won't know where the traffic jam is. So for me, there's a collective intelligence that I have to not be quite so selfish. So I have left it on all the time, and it probably does therefore know far too much about me. Anyway, the thing with artificial intelligence is when you also start looking at it, there are people like this lovely gentleman here, who I think does look a little bit like a Bond villain, so I find it quite scary. If you watch him on the YouTube video, he looks a lot like a Bond villain. And then there are people like this. Everybody, I'm sure, knows who that is. He fascinates me, absolutely fascinates me. He's known for being a musician, clearly. I think, well, hands up, how many people in the room know he's really into artificial intelligence? Okay, great. And for me, the reason for putting him up here is really just to talk about what it is about what he's doing that I think is really positive. And he's somebody that is using his skills. When he talks about this, and part of this actually, when I said maybe I could talk about this, I'd been out for one of my very early morning kind of meditation-y walks, and I've been fascinated by a podcast that Will was talking about, the work he does around artificial intelligence. And he talked about one of the gifts that he feels he brings to it, and what took him into this work, was his ability to pattern match. And I'd never really thought about it, but I think of people who are in the tech sphere. Actually, when you're a coder, you spot problems because you see that there is an error in that rhythm. Something's not quite there. So for me, I'm just sort of sharing that, because I think in artificial intelligence, we're building machines that are going to be capable of that, but will they really ever be quite capable of what we as humans can do? Personally, I don't think they will. I hope they won't, but I love the concept that Will comes up with, which is about personal artificial intelligence. Because I want my Google to be really smart. Frankly, at the moment, it's quite dumb, because I do a lot of the same trips, and it seems to forget. It knows I'm doing them, but it doesn't actually go the next step, which it could if it was truly intelligent. When I don't know if anybody's heard him talk, also talks about the 4 data monarchies. Anyone familiar with that? Yeah? And I love that. So he's talking about Apple, Amazon, Google and Facebook. He doesn't talk about Microsoft. Our friend the Bond villain, he says there's 5. Whichever way you look at it, for me what's fascinating is that we're no longer in a world that is as dominated by the country in which you are based as it once was. And that for me is both exciting but also quite terrifying for obvious reasons. So, thinking about Will I Am, a musician, an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, I love the fact that he's using his skills, his interests in coding, and he's well known for talking about coding and encouraging lots and lots of young people to get into coding, which I think is a fantastic thing. What I love is the fact he talks about this thing of having his antenna up, not a real antenna, clearly, but being in this world in a way that notices what's going on around him. And I think for me, in the artificial intelligence space, these are all things that are going to have to be developed, because most of the machines that I've seen working in this space don't yet. However, we talked just by chance. Anyone else know Pepper? Know who Pepper is? Okay, brilliant. I was lucky enough to meet Pepper, or a version of Pepper, I do realise there's more than one, a little while ago, and love the fact that this robot's been developed specifically and been trialled in all sorts of spaces. Lots of queuing-based systems are using her, or him. Lots of care homes are trialling it to take away some of the complex repetitive work, like, apparently it's complex and repetitive, running bingo with people, with elderly people, because actually that's not a skill that you really need a human to do. Pepper can fulfil that perfectly adequately. With a great touchscreen pad in her stomach, she can really drive and change the way that the staff in the care home can actually get round and do the work that humans are really needed to do. And when you look at this, and I'm sure some of you have, Boston Dynamics, one of the world's leading edge robotics companies, they've done some fantastic work. If you Google them or look at them on YouTube, the Atlas machine that's now been able to do backflips. I don't think I could do backflips when I was a kid, but this machine is now sufficiently skilled. The gyroscopes that are in it can do all of that stuff. I go, why? Because actually they can then deploy this machine to go out and do search and rescue. Particularly living here as a kid who grew up on Dartmoor, I love the fact that it's not going to be long, it's possibly, hopefully going to be in my lifetime, where some of these machines can be deployed in that way. They're not going to get tired, they're not going to be troubled by poor visibility or anything else. They can go out and search for people, even above and beyond. Did you want to say?
Yes, the only problem is they might have a flat battery.
Well, they might, but then battery technology is coming on. But yeah, there's loads of these different things that are enabling us to achieve far more. So for me, artificial intelligence can be a good thing, but the point of then reflecting on a good thing for all of these reasons. Talking about spirituality, however, for me that's the counterbalance. In a way, that's the counterweight that needs to come into it. It's the humanity piece. That's really what I want to get us to think about. I love this definition of spirituality. So for anyone who thought I was going to come and talk religion or faith, no, I'm really not. For me, this piece, Elizabeth Lesser, I love it. Spirituality is a brave search for the truth about existence, fearlessly peering into the mysterious nature of life. You know, that for me is such a strong message for anybody working in the AI sphere, that this is keeping on the right side, looking at the positives, making sure it's used for the right reasons for the world as we develop and use this technology. But it's fascinating. You know, when you look at the beginnings of artificial intelligence, I don't know about other people, I wasn't a computer scientist, so I've come into computers probably much later than some. But Alan Turing's paper back in 1950, the imitation game itself, can machines think? Any reflection, any thought? Anyone want to? Do you see really intelligent machines around us yet?
Yeah. Coming, yes.
Coming, yeah. Not here yet. And I just hope they do stay on the right side. So, what I wanted to just share with you, because this is a little bit about the way our brains work now and about where these thoughts come from. What does anybody like to tell me? What did you see?
Horse.
Sorry?
Horse.
Ah, excellent. Anyone else? Yes. So it's all about the perspective from which you look at it. Everybody see a horse now? Will it go back? Oh, wrong one. Does everybody see the frog? Yeah. Everybody see the horse. Now for me, thinking about things like artificial intelligence, a computer's not going to need to see that twice. They will see both twice. So I think there can be significant advantages. However, what's interesting in the way we humans learn is if I then show you this picture, anybody tell me what they can see? Sorry? Someone can see a lady? So the lady's reading a book looking that way? Yeah? Anyone else wants to tell me they can see something else? Huh?
Mr. Miyagi.
Sorry?
Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, there's an old man looking that way. So that would be their eye. That would be his sort of moustache and mouth. Yeah? And it's interesting because often people will find those two images much more quickly having looked at these two. But again, a machine would, I think, work that one out. I'm not sure whether machines are quite ready to pick the subtleties in that image out. And even though you probably couldn't see both to begin with, it doesn't take our brains long to, once you've seen it, you'll never be able to look at that image and not see both sides. You might have to remind yourself, because you'll always have a preference, that's the way your brain works. You might have to remind yourself, oh yeah, there's an old man and a young woman, or whatever you saw them as, but you'll always be able to see them quite quickly. Okay, so now I want to really talk about brains and intelligence. So this is just a slide that talks about what a brain is. So if I ask everybody, where's your brain? Here? Great. Excellent. It's not a trick question, and this is what I love about neuroscience and the developments that are taking place these days. So you probably can't read all the details on that, but basically the head brain we all know about. It's full of neural pathways, it's where lots of the processing and assimilation of information takes place. However, the same criteria exist in your heart and in your gut, and it doesn't include on this slide, but as you said, the vagal nerve up the back also carries a lot of those characteristics coming out through the pineal gland at the back of the head. And personally, I find this fascinating because what it suggests is that you can no longer rely on making great decisions just using this thing. Because this is great processing capacity, but we've probably all thought about when someone says, how did you know how to do that? And people go, oh, I don't know, I just followed my heart, or gut instinct. You think of the times when somebody's, and there are many, many stories of those superhuman strength, when somebody's child is at risk of a car rolling into them, they will hold that car back. That comes from pure base instinct, the fight or flight mechanism which is sitting here in your gut brain. You don't think about it up here, you don't think, oh, it'd be a good idea if I could hold that car up while stop my child getting run over. You just do it, you just act. And so for me, when I talk about spirituality, there's so much more in terms of where that cognitive function for humans comes from. But I think it's very interesting to reflect on what we're doing in the world of artificial intelligence as to how and when we'll really be able to develop machinery that is truly capable of cognitive thought. And also, talking about the gut brain just for a minute, because it can be really important for people, the gut brain produces more serotonin than the head brain. So if you or anyone you know struggles with mental health, there are loads. This is an old piece from the Independent, which must be 5 or 6 years ago now. I think a lot of people will know this sort of stuff is out there, but it's really important that we do and we share that knowledge, because, sorry.
I was about to say, now, recently they actually decided to actually give people poo transplants to improve the gut bacteria for people who are depressed.
Yeah, it has moved on from the work that they've been doing in mice to understand what makes mice skinny and what makes mice fat. But changing that's why we, and don't buy all that rubbish they try and sell you in terms of the gut bacteria, because it could be done much more naturally. But it's just really important to know that, the way we used to treat ourselves, take a pill, you will feel better, isn't having the impact because it's not hitting the right intelligence centre in your body. So, hierarchy of competence, I'm sure you've probably heard of this. Think of when you went to learn to drive. It's very pertinent for me because I've just taught both my kids to drive before they went off to university. You start off at the bottom, you're kind of unconsciously incompetent. You don't know that you would want to drive possibly until you start to have that opportunity or you're of an age where it's legal to do so. And then you start to learn some of the skills, you start to consider what there might be involved in learning to drive. So you become consciously incompetent. You know what you can't do. My daughter hated parallel parking. She knew parking was a thing. She knew she needed to do it to pass the test. She hated doing it. Then you become consciously competent, which is great because you know stuff and you know how to do it. You've got the skills to do it. But then, of course, the next level up is actually going into those deeper parts in the brain where you become unconsciously competent. Who's ever driven for me, I spend a lot of my time on the A38 up to Exeter and beyond. Who's ever driven that road so regularly you suddenly go, whoa, missed Ashburton. Didn't hit anything, was quite safe, but I don't remember seeing all the road signs that came past Ashburton. That's when you are, one hopes, unconsciously competent. Because actually your conscious brain doesn't really need to be processing. You are so skilled as a driver, or you are so skilled at what you're doing, that you can almost do it in your sleep. I definitely don't recommend that, by the way. But, and for me, this is the stuff that I think will be very, very hard for the machines that we're building to get to, and I personally hope they never get to that level. So what I just wanted to talk about in terms of really bringing this to an end, talking about artificial intelligence and spirituality, the multiple brain stuff is all evidence in neuroscience. Something we're beginning to talk about, but we don't talk about enough, and this I realise you can't see, but the relationship that Freud talks about between the unconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious mind. I don't like to talk about subconscious personally, because there's nothing suboptimal about it. Your conscious brain does all the quick decision making. The next layer down often does some of the other processing and possibly some of the things you think about when you sleep. But it's deep in that unconscious that you have all the wisdom you would ever need. And the point of this slide is really just to see where you look at these 4 circles. Meditation is the key. So that's my link back to spirituality. This was meant to be a fairly asexual image, but hopefully it's not far enough back. You can't choose whether it's a man or a woman. It's somebody sitting there with his cap on, with his or her cap on back to front. But really my point being that in this world, as we move towards a world where artificial intelligence becomes much more the piece that helps us to drive the or to live the way we live our lives, to achieve far more. Because there are machines that can do things to a point for us. When our cars are all automated, when our houses are all really clever and the data's all secured, so we don't have to worry about whoever it is, whatever nation, coming in to have a look at it. That's Will.i.am's dream world. The work that he's doing around call centre technologies, etc., is driven from a place that says data is actually king. When we all own our data, then we have the security and the surety that we need. But the point here in terms of the meditation piece is actually that's how you harness that depth, that real inner wisdom. So I'd just like to leave you with that thought, and if anybody wants to pick up on how to meditate and all those things, there are some great meditation and mindfulness teachers out there, but there is also an app for that, and I wholeheartedly recommend the Insight Timer. I've used it for about 4 years now, and I was quite chuffed when it's a bit like Runkeeper or Strava for those who are fitter. I used to use Runkeeper all the time. This thing has that built in. So from an intelligence point of view, I love it. It told me the other day, and I'm thrilled, so I'll share it, that I've meditated every day for 240 consecutive days. I didn't start with a New Year's resolution. I started with sometime mid-January. I know this stuff works. I know I'm more effective in my day job when I create that space in my life. And I'll tell you, it does work. So that's it, I think. I'm just about done on time. Thank you.